in connection to the days of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz, which is of course the days of the release of the Friedrich Rebbe from prison, the Rebbe tells a story that the Friedrich Rebbe said that in the Maimorim of Rosh Hashanah of that year, Tov Reish Pei Zayin, the topic of Hashgacha Pratis ended up in the Maimor. He ended up discussing the idea of Hashgacha Pratis according to the Shita of the Baal Shem Tov, how Hashgacha Pratis is not only on the human being, but also on every single little detail of Doimeim, Tzomeach, Chai, the inanimate, the plants, and animals, etc. And the Friedrich Rebbe says that if not for that, he doesn't know how he would be able to tolerate the suffering of the imprisonment, etc. In this particular Sikha, the Rebbe is going to be discussing which aspect of the imprisonment wouldn't the Friedrich Rebbe been able to manage if not for thinking about this Hashgacha Pratis, the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, and more specifically, why the system of Hashgacha Pratis according to the Shita of the Baal Shem Tov. Because the question is, everyone, even those that don't go with the opinion of the Baal Shem Tov, everyone agrees that at least on the human beings, there's definitely Hashgacha Pratis. And certainly when we're speaking about a Yid that's Shomer Torah and Mitzvahs, and how much more so a Nasi Yisrael, a Rebbe that's doing everything he's doing, impacts Klal Yisrael, then surely there's Hashgacha Pratis, even without the Shita of the Baal Shem Tov. And furthermore, the Rebbe says, when we're speaking specifically about something that's connected to Torah and mitzvahs, that's what the Friedrich Rebbe was involved in spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit, etc. Obviously, this is all part of working for Hashem, and this is all part of the plan of Hashem. So why specifically do we need to be mizboinen on the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, and specifically, according to the Shita of the Baal Shem Tov, to sort of help out the situation? Now, the Rebbe starts off by saying, seemingly we could just say, that the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe was thinking about, and it was coming to mind, the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, so he's able to feel that all the pain, all the suffering in jail is all part of Hashem, we're coming from Hashem, and therefore he's able to tolerate it. But the Rebbe says if that's the case, if that's what the Friedrich Rebbe is saying, seemingly he should have been more focused on the concept of Ein Ra Yored Milmayla, nothing bad comes from Hashem. Because obviously it's all coming from Hashem, that's not even a question. So why the focus on this idea of Hashgacha Pratis specifically? The truth of the matter is, why the Friedrich Rebbe is not focusing on the idea that nothing bad comes from Hashem, that's obvious. Because the Friedrich Rebbe is so absolutely dedicated to the Eibishter, to Hashem, to Torah and mitzvahs, that he's totally not even thinking about himself and his personal suffering. And therefore there's no need even to think about that. Is it bad, and there's no bad coming from Hashem, etc. But if that's the case, then why is the Friedrich Rebbe emphasizing the suffering and the pain of the imprisonment? On the contrary, he should be rejoicing from the opportunity of having Mesiras Nefesh for spreading Torah and strengthening Yiddishkeit. As we know that Rabbi Akiva, when he was being tortured, he said, my whole life I was looking forward to this moment, to have Mesiras Nefesh for Hashem. So what's the suffering that the Friedrich Rebbe is exactly having, for which he needs to be mizboinen about Hashgacha Pratis? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is like this. The Friedrich Rebbe explains in Maimorim that there's a major difference between the Mesiras Nefesh of Rabbi Akiva and the Mesiras Nefesh of Avraham Avinu. Rabbi Akiva, as just mentioned, was looking for Mesiras Nefesh. In other words, he saw that as an end in itself, as a goal in itself, an ideal. There's such an amazing thing to have Mesiras Nefesh, in the way a person becomes so one and connected to Hashem through Mesiras Nefesh. Avraham Avinu, on the other hand, wasn't looking for Mesiras Nefesh. Avraham Avinu has one agenda, to publicize about Hashem in the world. If needed Mesiras Nefesh, of course he's ready for that. But in fact, says the Rebbe, if Avraham Avinu was imprisoned, he would actually be upset, because this is holding him back right now from being able to publicize Elikus in the world. Says the Rebbe the same thing by the Friedrich Rebbe. If it was about his own shleimus, his own perfections, his own ideal levels in avodas Hashem, so yes, his imprisonment and his suffering would cause him simcha. But since what matters to him is spreading Torah and mitzvahs, then the imprisonment causes him a tremendous amount of pain, because it's holding him back from being able to fulfill his mission of bringing Yidden closer to Hashem and to Torah. But the Rebbe is not satisfied yet. But the Rebbe says, seemingly we need to understand, since this avodah that he's involved in is clearly because this is Hashem's kavanah, and since the imprisonment of the Friedrich Rebbe definitely was not the Friedrich Rebbe's own fault, obviously it's because he's spreading Torah and mitzvahs, so this itself is part of Hashem's ratzon that he should be in prison right now, so why should he be upset? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, we know that there's two types of ways how a person can be involved in avodas Hashem, But the Rebbe first gives it with a mashal about two types of people doing work. You have a person that's a hired worker or an employee who does everything that he can in the most faithful and proper way, but more than that is not his problem. If there's any issues with the work or with his business, if he did his work faithfully and honestly during the day, he's able to go to sleep calmly, peacefully at night. He knows he did his job properly. But what about the employer? What about the boss? As long as the business isn't going properly, he can't sleep comfortably because it's his own business. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true in Avodas Hashem. You have a person that does everything he can. He'll even go to the extent of Mesiras Nefesh. But beyond that, in other words, if it's out of his control and he can't do anything, so he knows, look, everything is b'hashgacha pratis. Hashem runs the world. If I can't do anymore, so it's a sign that I don't need to do anymore. We know this oines rachamona patre. Hashem exempts someone that things are out of his control, and that's it. He's finished with his job. But when a Yid is connected so strongly to Hashem, that Hashem's will is his will, he feels it's his own private matter. Therefore, if the matter isn't being accomplished, then he is feeling tremendous pain over it, even if technically he did everything he can. And the Rebbe tells a story with the Rebbe Rashab, where there was a famous Asifas Rabbanim, a gathering of Rabbanim in Petrograd. The government wanted to institute a rule, a law, that Rabbanim and Melamdim need to have secular studies. And in fact, when the Rabbanim started standing up against it, the ministers of the government threatened with pogroms. The Rebbe Rashab got up, spoke very, very, very sharply against this decree, both about the secular studies and about how they could threaten with pogroms, at the end of which the Rebbe Rashab actually fainted. But because the Rebbe Rashab spoke so harshly against the government, they put him under house arrest. Eventually, one of the Rabbanim came to the Rebbe Rashab and sees him crying. And he says to the Rebbe Rashab, he says, Lubavitcher Rebbe, we did everything we can. Why are you crying? But what's the Rebbe Rashab's response and attitude? But the inyan hat sich nicht abgetan, but the matter wasn't achieved. In other words, there's this feeling of, even if I did everything I can, if you feel that it's your inyan, then you're in pain if it wasn't done. Says the Rebbe, the same thing was with the Baal HaGula, with the Frierdiker Rebbe. Since he's so permeated with the Eibishter's Ratzon to spread Yiddishkeit, especially that he knows that nobody else would be able to do the job in the same way that he would be able to do it, therefore the fact that he's right now in prison is causing him tremendous suffering, tremendous pain. But the Rebbe is still not satisfied, and the Rebbe pushes this even further. The Rebbe says it's still not understood. We know that everything is b'hashgacha pratis, that everything the Eibishter is doing is all with the purpose that elikus, that godliness, should be revealed in the world. That's the ultimate purpose of dira b'tachtoinim. Every single thing that's happening in the world is leading to that point. If that's the case, clearly if the Frierdiker Rebbe was put in prison, it's also that some sort of advantage, benefit should come out in Avodas Hashem as a result of it. As in fact, we saw that as a result and after the imprisonment, there was a much greater strengthening of spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit to the whole world, etc. So then we're back to square one. So then why is the Frierdiker Rebbe so betzar if ultimately this will lead to a better place? Says the Rebbe, but the point is, why he was feeling the pain and why he needed the explanation of Hashgacha Pratis, as we'll soon see, was because practically, even if it will lead later to something good, but right now, during the imprisonment, it is a situation of hell and vehester, of concealment, for not being able to spread Torah and Yiddishkeit and Chassidus, and therefore right now it is something very, very painful. So now we could go back and understand how the Chidush of the Baal Shem Tov and Hashgacha Pratis helps him. Because what does the Baal Shem Tov say? The Baal Shem Tov is Chidush is not only that Hashgacha Pratis is also in regards to Doimim Tzameach Chai. But rather, the Baal Shem Tov says, as the Frierdiker Rebbe again brings in one of the Yud Beis Tamuz Maimorim, that every single aspect of every single creature is noigeya, matters, and is relevant to the whole general kavanah of all of creation. A little blade of grass moving is noigeya to the whole kavanah. In other words, so that now we have a new difference between the Shita of the Baal Shem Tov and everything else. It's not only that there is Hashgacha Pratis regarding everything else, but that every detail of it is impacting the whole creation right now, the whole kavanah of Hashem. And therefore, applying this back to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe is now feeling that even the moments that I'm in jail, even the suffering in jail itself, all of this is not only to bring out something later after jail that things will be more strengthened in Yiddishkeit, but somehow that this suffering itself is part of being mashlim, Hashem's kavanah, which is about bringing Elikus into the world. In fact, says the Rebbe, it actually even expressed itself that with the actual imprisonment of the Frierdiker Rebbe, currently, right now, while the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, this was going to tremendous oirus by Yidden, and specifically by Chassidim, to strengthen themselves even more in the ways of the Frierdiker Rebbe of spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit. Furthermore, even in the prison itself, the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe stood there so strong with such toikif, with not being nispal from any of the people, this itself revealed in the prison itself that Einoid Mulvade, that there's absolutely nothing besides Hashem. And therefore, this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying, that the shit of Hashgacha Pratis, of the Baal Shem Tov, was what gave him that ability to be able to tolerate the suffering, the pain of the jail itself. And the Rebbe concludes with the Hira that obviously nothing can ever get in the way of fulfilling the mission of the Rebbe in spreading Chassidus. And on the other hand, even if we don't sometimes see the way how we could go about it and how to achieve it, we need to always remember that everything is b'hashgacha pratis, and we need to find in every single situation the particular way of how to be megal elikus right there and then.